good this evening as we start off is going to be about Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers. Now, he's coming good. I mean, there was a lot of criticism. There was a lot of negative energy around it, I suppose. Andy Dalton came in, he got dropped. It was all going a bit crazy in Carolina. I mean, they did lose over the weekend. They lost in overtime to Tampa Bay Buccaneers 26-23. But it was a close game the whole time. And I mean, if it wasn't for a fumble by Hubbard in overtime, they maybe could have gone and won it. But James, I mean, it's been a very turbulent time for Bryce in Carolina. They have had back-to-back losses, but it does feel like it's starting to come together a little bit, and there seems to be a little bit of a change in the whole mood around Bryce, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely so. I mean, the changes in coaching and obviously a lot in the positions and things around him was never really going to benefit him, and there's always a bit of a spotlight on that franchise with the owner and everything else. He's very outspoken and he sort of draws a lot of attention for the things that he does and says, and so that didn't help either. The sitting down, the benching, bringing in Andy Dalton, you have to say now looks like a good move. Yeah, it really has benefited him, and I just think as well there seems to be a little bit more. Well, at the start of the season, Young and Canales just seemed to have a little bit of friction. He was frustrated with Canales' conservative approach, but you can't really blame him for having done so based on the sort of play that was being put out onto the field. And there seemed to be a little bit of sort of like distrust between the pair. And you know, the sort of lack of cohesion and chemistry or whatever it was really seemed to be detrimental to the on-field play for Young as well. But now it seems more that Canales has got more time to get used to him. Whether, like, I think he's implementing more of his style on the rest of the team, and that's helped by having Dalton in and Young sit back and observe. And there seems to be more of a trust between the two of them now. He's got a unique, quite innovative play call style, and he seems to be trusting Young's decision making a little bit more than he was doing at the start. And there are a few other things as well. You know, I think he seems more comfortable running. He wasn't scrambling very much out. He seemed very nervous in the pocket. Now, you know, you saw, I think in the game at the weekend, there was he scored the 10-yard touchdown. There was a 3rd and 6, I believe it was, in the second quarter, and he sort of felt the pressure coming in from his right. He took off running to his left, held the ball, dived over the goal line as he was being tackled by, I think it was Anton Winfield Jr. And, you know, it's little things like that where you just, you know, we weren't seeing those last season. I think it's his first rushing touchdown since, I think it was week 1. And he just, it just seems much more comfortable, you know, 79.2 passer rating in that game. And in that, like, I think I've got it here somewhere, weeks 9 through 13, Young is the 3rd highest graded quarterback in PFF, ahead of Jackson and trailing only Burrow and Herbert. So, you know, what he's putting out there is obviously is good and is helping his team get into the positions that they need. So, you know, arrows up for Bryce Young, and it's really good to see, because I hate these sort of, you know, first round busts and in these one season and done and benched. And you do think that there is growth time, a growth period that needs to be allowed for these young guys. And it is unfortunate because football is a business and it is about winning, but too much pressure is put on these guys to win early. We've seen the benefit of time. You know, I mean, imagine if the Bills had just given up on Josh Allen after the first season, and, you know, or, you know, you're seeing the benefit of sitting a little bit from the likes of Drake May. Obviously, Pat Mahomes sat behind Alex Smith. Thank you. That's like the most basic name to remember as well. So, you know, they do get rushed. There is a lot of pressure on them, and sometimes that in a bubble can just be very overwhelming. The price tag, everything else as well. So, yeah, I'm really pleased to see it coming together for him. He looks, you know, back to part of the player that we saw in college that made him be that made him become that number 1 prospect. And And yeah, I think they've benefited as well, partly from the schedule. They've ran their games really close as well, and everything that he started. It's not like he's been blown out like he was being at the start of the season. And so if he can keep a good run now for this season, for the rest of this season, I think Canales and the Panthers will be much more happy building around him in the off season, and that makes it better for the fan base and the organization as well, knowing where you are and going in and having that plan and saying, okay, this is our guy. Let's see what we can put around him, and let's see if we can improve on what was out there last year.
I personally think, Johnny, that this has all been since Munich. I think something changed in Munich, because I was in that press conference after the game, and I know I've told a story, but we saw Bryce and a lot of the players out on the Friday. Now, they weren't out drinking or anything like that. They were just going around looking at the sea. Both organisations were very, very good at letting their players go and enjoy themselves in Germany. And because we sort of said this, I don't remember saying it on the pod, but we definitely say it socially. It didn't really matter if either of these teams won or lost, really, in Munich, because they're both not very, very good franchises. They're not doing very well. They could lose and go, okay, well, we were abroad, we weren't at home, etc. And then if they win, they go back feeling like conquering heroes. And in the press conference after the game, Canales was so upbeat about Young and was very much like, I've been impressed with what I've seen. I'm impressed with what I've seen. And since then, they won that game. They've lost the last two to Kansas and Tampa Bay. But it's flipped. The start of the season, no touchdowns in the first 3 weeks, but 3 picks. And then in the last 3 weeks, it's been 3 touchdowns and no picks. Now, I'm not saying 3 touchdowns in 3 games is not great. We're not saying that Bryce is the finished product right now. But do you think it is sort of like that? Since then, we've seen this sort of change in the mentality, maybe, of Carolina in general as well, because it seems like the whole team, not just Bryce, has found something in Germany.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, I'd love to know what happened to Bryce during the 3 weeks that he was benched, because he looks a much more mature player for, obviously the humiliation of getting benched as a former first-year overall pick. I think the Panthers won the next game with Andy Dalton. His future's completely up in the air. People are talking about him getting traded, for measly picks to other teams across the league. So I think that sense of, the pressure is almost off now for Bryce Young, in terms of people are considering him a bust already. It's over for him in Carolina. And since he's come back, since he's got that second chance, we're like you say, his game in Munich, he's probably got better in every game he's played since then. I think in the last 2 weeks, especially, we're talking about, if there had been, a kick made or a catch made, the Panthers would have won both of those games.
And there was some spectacular catches in this game. I mean, I like for it. You got to remember, this is not a great offense, and yet
exactly. Yeah, there were a lot of drops, and I think of the last few weeks, you could make a highlights reel of all the missed catches and the throws that Bryce Young has made. I think, in this game, looking back at him, he coming up against Baker Mayfield. They looked at, I don't know, Bryce Young looks very similar to how Mayfield has been playing, in terms of his ability to scramble and make plays out of the pocket. He's much more controlled and comfortable with pressure and coming up against the blitz. So yeah, I think it's all about maturity now with Bryce Young, and I think I don't want to say that he's completely cemented himself as the future. I still think the Panthers still need to win a few games, but let's consider that the Panthers have, obviously, it's looking likely they'll have a top 5 pick, possibly even the first overall pick. Do you take a quarterback, or do you do what the Bears did a couple of years ago to them and trade away and completely build around Bryce? That seems like the more sensible option going into 2025. So I think he's come into his own. There's obviously a lot of question marks around the rest of the team. I thought that the defense has stepped up a lot, particularly the defensive line, in recent weeks. So there's some pieces there. There's some injuries, some players to come back. But if they can pick out, 2 or 3 really, really top players, especially at receiver, when Thielen obviously had a great game, but he's coming towards the end of his career. Xavier Getz has been, I think, a bit part player in his first year. He'll obviously improve. But if you can get that stud stud player. Around him, obviously Chuba Hubbard has been great this year. Jonathan Brooks coming back. This is looking like a good team in a division that is very winnable. And even if they won this game the weekend, they could have been thinking, hang on a minute, we're technically still in with a chance of winning the South here. So I think the confidence is getting back for the Panthers, but I still think they need, if they can win at least 1 or 2 games to round up the year, I think that's a huge building block for both the player and the franchise going into next year.
Okay.